It did not begin in Rome. It began 25 kilometers away, in a city called Alba Longa, with a throne that changed hands, and a daughter who was supposed to prevent what came next. The solution was clean. The solution failed completely. King Numitor of Alba Longa was pushed aside by his own brother Romulus in 771 BC. Every heir was eliminated. Only one daughter survived, assigned as a Vestal virgin, forbidden by law from producing children. The problem appeared solved. Then she became pregnant. The twins were placed in a basket and given to the Tiber River. The basket drifted. It caught on a sandbank. According to Roman founding myth, a wolf emerged from the tree and nursed the infants. The river did not finish what it started. Romulus and Remus grew up as wolf-raised forest boys, then shepherd sons, then troublemakers, then the truth, they were Alba Longa's lost heirs. They marched back. Overthrew the uncle. Restored their grandfather. Then decided they wanted something of their own. They found the location together, 7 hills, the Tiber Valley, perfect terrain. They both saw the same city in the same landscape. They disagreed on which hill to build it on. The disagreement that would produce Rome began with 2 brothers wanting the same thing. Romulus built a small wall to mark the boundary of his city. Remus jumped over it to mock its insignificance. Romulus killed him. This is the founding event of the civilization that would eventually govern 40 million people. A fratricide over a wall that wasn't finished yet. Rome's earliest population was whoever had nowhere else to go, runaway slaves, exiles, criminals, men on the run from every neighboring city. Romulus called it an asylum city. The asylum filled with people who had nothing to lose. That turned out to be useful. 390 BC. The Gauls crossed the Apennines, defeated the Roman army, and entered Rome. The senators received this news in the Senate chamber, men who believed Rome was impregnable discovering that Rome was exactly as pregnable as everything else. That discovery changed everything. The Gauls burned most of Rome. They camped in the ruins for 7 months. They left after Rome paid a ransom in gold. The humiliation was not the burning. It was that Rome had believed it could not burn. The Gauls corrected that belief permanently. One senator sat in the ruins of the Forum and watched the Gauls move through his city. He did not look afraid. He looked like a man memorizing something. He was. That memorization produced the most militaristic civilization the ancient world had ever seen. After the Gallic sack, Rome turned itself into a machine. Not gradually. With the focused totality of a civilization that has decided vulnerability is unacceptable. The drilling was harder. The formations were tighter. The ambition was larger. The trauma became fuel. Rome had never fought a naval war. Carthage had fought nothing else. Rome's solution: capture a Carthaginian ship, reverse engineer it, build a fleet. First Punic War. Rome won. The lesson: unprecedented problems require unprecedented solutions, and Rome was willing to build from scratch. Hannibal crossed the Alps. In winter. With 50,000 soldiers and 37 war elephants. This was considered impossible. Hannibal's definition of impossible and Rome's definition of impossible were different documents, and for 16 years inside Italy, Hannibal's version was the operative one. Hannibal looked at Italy from the Alpine Pass and saw the country that would defeat him eventually and had not yet started the process. One eye was blind, lost to infection on the march. The intact eye and the damaged eye looked at the same future together. The Ides of March, 44 BC. 30 senators with daggers, 23 wounds, 1 dead man in his toga on the Senate floor. The senators walked out believing they had saved the Republic. The Roman people's reaction informed them immediately that they had not. Caesar's calculating eyes scanned the Senate chamber one final time and found the thing that should not have been there in one face, and the calculation was completed, and the answer was too late. 30 years of reading rooms, and the last room was one read too slowly. Rome went silent after the Ides of March. Not the silence of relief, the silence of people who had lost someone they depended on before they knew they depended on him. The senators had expected gratitude. The streets gave them something else entirely. Augustus was 18 years old when Caesar died and left him the inheritance. The pale analytical eyes received the news of the assassination and began calculating immediately. He was 18. He would run the most powerful state in the Western world for 44 years. The Battle of Actium, 31 BC. The last civil war. The last time two Roman armies would face each other for control of the state. Augustus won not because he was a great general but because he had waited longer than everyone else and outlasted them all. Augustus stood in the Roman Forum as first citizen and was very careful about every word he used. Not king. Never king. He was king in every functional sense and understood perfectly that the word was a weapon that would be aimed at him if he said it. The Roman military camp on the Rhine, 9 AD. 3 legions, 20,000 professional soldiers, the finest infantry force the ancient world had produced, preparing for what their commander had been told was a routine administrative march. Arminius had told him this. Arminius had been very specific. Arminius knew Rome perfectly. He had grown up around it, served in its army, earned its trust. He knew how legions moved, how they thought, how their confidence operated. He knew their greatest weakness: they assumed everyone wanted to become Roman. His people did not. The Teutoburg forest received the Roman column without reaction. The trees did not announce what was in them. The narrow paths did not explain why they were narrowing. 20,000 soldiers marching in administrative formation through terrain that had been prepared specifically for them. Arminius separated from the Roman column and rejoined his people. He was still wearing the Roman uniform. He would remove it shortly. What he removed with it was everything Rome believed about its own invulnerability in territory it had decided was pacified. The ambush was not a battle. Roman discipline requires open ground, formations, the application of overwhelming organized force. The forest allowed none of these. Germanic fighters struck and disappeared. The column could not form. Orders could not travel. Discipline had nothing to apply itself to. A Roman legionary trained for years to fight in organized formations found himself alone in a forest where the formations were gone. The training was intact. The context for the training had been removed. This is the specific experience of an institution meeting something it was not designed for. The Roman Forum on the day Augustus received his titles. Every element of the ceremony was republican in form. The content was entirely different. The Republic had ended. Nobody announced it. The word king was never spoken. The reality the word described was fully present. The Roman aqueduct system moved water over hundreds of kilometers to supply cities of hundreds of thousands. This was the actual instrument of Roman power, not the legions. The legions enforced the infrastructure. The infrastructure was the reason people inside the empire stayed. 70,000 people in the Colosseum. Every social class in its assigned tier. All watching the same sand. An emperor who understood that shared spectacle was a form of governance had built this building. The Colosseum was not entertainment. It was politics with better acoustics. The man in the Colosseum's middle tier had rights. He received grain from the state. He lived inside a legal system. He could vote. He thought about none of this. He watched the arena. That was also what the emperor intended. The Rhine frontier. Stone forts at regular intervals, connected by roads, permanent soldiers, patrol boats on the river. On the far bank, the forest that killed 3 legions. Rome stopped at this river after Teutoburg. The empire ended here. The frontier was permanent. 193 AD. The Praetorian Guard auctioned the position of emperor. A man named Didius Julianus purchased it. He ruled for 66 days. Then the guard that sold him the position found a better buyer. The institution Augustus created to protect emperors had become the mechanism for creating and disposing of them. 3rd century Rome. The Forum still stood. The aqueduct still ran. The legal system still operated. The emperors changed monthly. Sometimes weekly. The soldiers in the streets had the authority. The institutions of the Republic and Empire still existed as forms. The content had evacuated. Diocletian looked at the empire's map and saw what it was: too large, too unstable, too complex for one person from one city. His solution, the Tetrarchy, was correct and desperate simultaneously. 4 emperors. 4 capitals. The old Rome abandoned as a governing center. Brilliant. Temporary. Constantine built Constantinople in 330 AD on a peninsula between 2 seas. The best defended position in the Mediterranean world. He built it as a Christian city. He built the future there. He understood that the future was in the east and acted on that understanding completely. The Goths arrived at the Danube in their tens of thousands, not as an army but as a people, fleeing the Huns behind them. Rome let them in. The decision was correct by Roman administrative logic and catastrophic in its consequences. Both things were true simultaneously. The Roman official recorded the Goth family on his wax tablet with administrative efficiency. Neither man knew what the tablet contained beyond names and numbers. The empire had processed hundreds of thousands this way. This particular processing was different. The difference would not be visible for years. The Visigoths sacked Rome in 410 AD. The city had not been entered by enemies in 800 years. The sack was selective, almost respectful by ancient standards. The psychological damage exceeded the physical damage. Rome's invulnerability was the city's deepest infrastructure. That infrastructure was gone now. The senator watched from his doorway as Visigoths moved through the street beyond his gate. The face held the expression of a person watching a structural assumption collapse. Not the building, the assumption the building was built on. That assumption had been standing longer than the building. The Roman road still ran through territory that was no longer Roman. The infrastructure outlasted the authority by decades. The roads connected things that were no longer administratively connected. They would continue connecting them for centuries. The empire fell. The roads did not fall with it. On a Roman road in the 5th century, a Germanic warrior in Roman armor, a Roman merchant, a Goth family, a Roman soldier without his unit. All walking the same road, in the same direction, on pavement laid by people who built it for a different world. Rome in 476 still had the Colosseum. Still had the aqueducts. Still had the Forum. What it no longer had was the thing that made those structures mean what they were built to mean. The last Western emperor sat on a throne that everyone in the room understood was a form without content. Romulus Augustus read the document asking him to stop being emperor. The name was the cruelest accident in Roman history, Romulus, founder's name, Augustulus, little Augustus. The first and the last in one young face, reading a document, in a city that had been Rome for 1,000 years. Odoacer held the imperial insignia, diadem, purple cloak, scepter, and wrapped them carefully for shipment to Constantinople. The act was administrative. The Western Roman Empire ended not in fire but in correctly filed paperwork, handled professionally, by a man who understood what he was completing. Constantinople survived for 1,000 years after Rome's western fall. The triple land walls of Theodosius held against everything. The city was the most defensible position in the Mediterranean world. 1,000 years of survival visible in one skyline on the Bosphorus. The Ottoman cannon of 1453 was something the walls of Theodosius were not built to resist. The walls had been built in the 5th century and had held against everything the intervening 1,000 years produced. They had not been designed for this. Nothing had been. Constantine XI stood at the land walls of Constantinople and rested his hands on stone that had been standing for 1,000 years. The Ottoman fires filled the plain beyond. The hands on the wall knew what the wall had held and what it was about to face. Constantine XI removed the imperial purple before the final assault. Not surrendering, choosing. He would die as a soldier, not as a captive emperor. The purple was folded and placed on the wall. He picked up a sword. Both acts were the same decision. Multiple eyewitnesses saw Constantine XI at the gate of St. Romanus, fighting alongside his soldiers, wearing nothing that identified him as emperor. After that moment, he is not found. The last emperor of Rome disappeared into the rubble of walls his empire had built 1,000 years before. Rome began with a man killing his brother over a wall that wasn't finished. It ended with an emperor disappearing into walls that had stood for 1,000 years. In between, 2,000 years of roads and law and sewers and spectacle, still here. The wall is gone. Everything the wall became is not.